I want to go ahead and kind of explain my process behind the anti-flash method and a little bit of a preparation for what I do when I'm out in the field and when I get back into editing. So this is a basic bedroom that I shot for a not custom home builder, a home builder near me. And what I did was I basically set up camera right here, and I pointed the flash directly up into the ceiling, pointed a little bit back toward me, just so I could get a little bit less of a hot spot on the ceiling. And the reason I do this is because it fills up the room very nicely. But the only thing that I'm lighting up are the walls. I'm not worried about anything in the foreground or anything that might be in the background. I'm just lighting up the walls that I see. And when I do that, I make sure that I get it slightly overexposed so I can drop the highlights down in Lightroom and then pump up the shadows. So moving on to the next layer, this is where I go ahead and make my shadows. So I'm just pretty much right here by the window creating the shadows as if they were coming from that window and making it look very natural. It's also very soft. And because of and how I create that softness with the light is I'm at a very high shutter speed. The reason why is because I don't do window pulls very often, and I don't blend in ambient very often. So because of this, I create these very nice soft shadows, and I'm using a Rove Light 600. You can use an AD200 or a Yongnuo flash or anything like that, speed light, or a big old studio strobe like I have right here. I just use one flash and it works well for me. So going on to the next layer, I'm sort of just filling in that gap that I had right here, where I was here, and then I just go ahead and flash this area just so I have not this flat image right here that I'm using as a fill. I have some sort of dimension to it. So let's go ahead and go through the editing process. So I always start with my luminance values, so my exposure, and I do this through a preset that I made called just zero luminance, and it's basically just changing it to black and white and setting the white balance to auto. And I go ahead and I adjust the exposure and move on to the next one, adjust the exposure here and adjust the exposure here. And I'm looking at my histogram all the time. I'm not looking at the image, looking at the histogram. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get these mid-tone peaks right at this very faint line right here. I don't know if you can see it, but most of the time I'm trying to get it between these two lines about right here. But I want this image to be a little bit brighter, to be a little bit more to make it stand out a little bit more. So same thing with this one. The peak is at more towards the highlight range, so it's a little bit brighter. And then this one, of course, is a little bit over that, so it's a bit towards the middle of this line and this line. And then I go ahead and I change it to my basic preset, which is basically just changing it to color, dropping the highlights by 40, shadows up to 40, and chromatic aberration and profile corrections. So it's very simple. That's all I do. I don't even do any sharpening until I get into Photoshop. So I do that with all of these and go ahead and highlight all of them and edit as layers in Photoshop. Alright, let's get this open. It might take a little bit of time. There we go. Keep it going, Photoshop. You can do it. Alright, cool. Now that we have Now that we have our layers in Photoshop, we're gonna go ahead and edit this. Duh. So we're gonna go ahead and select all layers, layer, and arrange reverse. That's gonna reverse our layers and kind of getting it into the order that we want. And let's turn these off, and we're starting with that nice bright base layer. Next thing we can do is turn these two on and put white layer masks on them. And the reason why is because we're going to be brushing in or brushing out our light stand or ourself from the image. Next thing we can do is highlight both of these layers and change them to darken. And you can see where this is going. So now what we can do is just start brushing ourselves out. Fairly simple. Same thing with this one. Just kind of brushing ourselves out. And that's it. It's pretty much a done image. The only thing I would do next is go into Lumenzia and go to midtones and add a contrast layer. And I would go to my own action and go to sharpen no edge. And that would sharpen up the image very nicely. Perfect.